Hola, hello everybody. My name is Jennifer Mulwantwa. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Water Research Commission in South Africa, and I'm pleased to present to the Brazil Water Week 2022 on water, health and sanitation for all. The Water Research Commission is the Schedule 3A entity. It is a public entity mandated to support the Water Ministry on issues related to water security. It is funded through a water research levy, which is a unique model that ensures that year on year there's adequate funding for water and sanitation research. We prioritize our water and sanitation research in support of legislation, national policy, cross-sectoral policy and master plans. Therefore, our key focus areas are on water resource and ecosystems, water use, wastewater and sanitation futures, as well as water utilization in agriculture. We also drive innovation acceleration through partnerships and best practice through generation of knowledge products for the sector. We are focusing on water research in South Africa. We have also started with identifying the emerging threats, and not only are these applicable to South Africa, but some of them are actually at global threats as well. So population growth and rapid urbanization is definitely one of those areas, because we understand that by 2050, 66% of the global population is projected to be urban, and settlements therefore continue to go unplanned, and some of them in South Africa particularly are growing into the flood zones. We also have got aging and prohibitive costs of new infrastructure, particularly where we're looking at current sewer and centralized wastewater treatment facilities, where we're looking at the refurbishments of infrastructure as well as repairs that are very costly, and the cost of also implementing new sanitation and infrastructure is very expensive. Water scarcity and stress is one such threat. We know that by 2030, half of global population could be facing water shortages. It's even more pronounced in South Africa because we are a semi-arid country which receives less than the average, global average in terms of precipitation. Our demand could therefore outstrip supply by 40%. So climate change is the fourth such risk, and it is projected that in South Africa, the west is going to be very dry. That is where we're going to be having challenges around droughts, but also we know that the east is going to flood, and there we are going to be having challenges around the frequent and prolonged as well as very intense floods that are happening in the eastern side of the country. Our drivers of change as identified include climate change, aging and unsustainable infrastructure, water stress, as well as population growth and rapid urbanization. Therefore, in looking at the issues around water security, we have focused on the sustainable use of our water resources. For that, we are developing the protection of the water sources as one of the critical areas that we have to look at. And we need to refocus our minds and understanding around the utilization of water. Globally and most prevalent, most people, when they're talking about water sources, they're looking at your rivers and water that they can see, which we know to be called as surface water. However, we need to also start looking at the use of groundwater, rainwater, as well as wastewater, which should not be seen as a waste, but rather as a resource. In doing all of this, it is important that we have assessment and forecasting, particularly in the development of early warning systems, in order to be able to understand where are we coming from, what is the current status, what do we want to get to, and how do we then deal with challenges. But most importantly, when you have these systems, you need a communication protocol that is going to ensure that everyone in the value chain, as well as different stakeholders, users and communities, as well as government entities and authorities, are able to communicate effectively and are able to put in place the measures that need to be implemented to ensure that we're able to deal with challenges as they arise. Therefore, it is very much important that we monitor the state of our infrastructure, and in particular looking at quantity. So are we able to convey all of the water that is coming in through precipitation or rainfall And where necessary, are we able to also store this? And it's important also to focus on storages of the future, taking into consideration our understanding around the increased evaporation and evapotranspiration that's going to be linked to climate change. We have to definitely be able to monitor for quality, but also consider multiple use. We have to ensure that there is water is utilized which is fit for purpose. So for drinking water purposes, you're looking at potable water, but the waste out of that is coming out of that potable water then can be reused for other things such as reuse of grey water for agriculture, subsistence, agriculture and gardening. We can look at the reuse of the actual wastewater at a large scale for agricultural sector support. We can look at the use of the solids in terms of our multiple use. But also we have to focus on the linkages between climate and water. We have to understand that water and related data is critical in managing. They always say that if you cannot measure it, then you cannot manage it. Therefore, we have to ensure that there is availability of data and we're using that data for decision-making purposes. We have to also re-engineer and innovate our thinking around new monitoring tools and applications. We have to look at the use and the sharing of the resources and the skills and the people around the entire value chain of water so that we don't have duplication and waste of resources. We also have to look at the use and development of big data protocols and experimentation for transboundary as well as groundwater systems. We need to relook and consider remote sensing, which includes the integration of Earth observation data and satellite remote sensing for monitoring eutrophication. In South Africa, we have at the Water Research Commission developed a system where we are able to use satellite information to monitor the state of the dams and the reservoirs, particularly the state of eutrophication, which has an impact on people. We also have to be able to have improved rainfall prediction and use radar systems as well as ground-based rain gauges. We have to be able to allow or at least have real-time or near real-time monitoring and utilize the data that is coming out of that to make information which can be utilized for decision making. Therefore, we need to map and characterize our areas, taking into consideration that 10% of our land surface provides for 50% of runoff. Therefore, we need urgent protection and management, particularly of our source waters, to ensure that it is not wasted and it is managed properly. We also have to develop tools for ecological infrastructure management. Groundwater use in South Africa has really not been taken up a lot, and that is because of our past and our use and view of groundwater as more inferior water compared to surface water. And therefore, in our capacity at the local level of management of water, we are more focused on supply issues, but not necessarily availability, management, and sustainability thereof. For an example, our very own South African Reserve Bank has got a water demand of about 100 kiloliters a day, which can be fully met by the estimated yield of basement groundwater of about 155 kiloliters a day. However, because we don't have that focus on groundwater, currently we are discharging this wastewater from the basement of the Reserve Bank into the stormwater system, and that is a waste. And therefore, if we could recycle and look at other uses, we could actually save a lot. Therefore, multiple uses of water services, it's not a very common practice. But in South Africa, take into consideration, we've got rural communities, we've got different and not a homogeneous city type of town communities. We really are driving the use of multiple water use services. And for that, we are focusing mainly on community-driven schemes, which we have found that they are cost-effective, they reduce vandalism, through the pride and the uptake by the community and the protection of these systems, but also that improves food security as well as stimulating local economies. In terms of climate change, we know that the science is well established in terms of the prediction, in terms of the forecast, and therefore we know particularly that Southern Africa will become drier. But even within there, we know that the East will be more wetter than the West. Therefore, we need to have specific and effective fit for purpose infrastructure for water to deal with both areas. We need to be refocusing our attention on groundwater recharge within the eastern side, and also how do we store and reticulate some of that water that will be abundant within the eastern side to ensure that we've got balanced system. The Water Research Commission does also provide climate advisory panel, which was established by the WRC, and that is utilized for seasonal forecast, working with the South African Weather Services. I will just now go into some of the projects that we have engaged in, and some of them are ongoing. For example, in terms of monitoring water quality, we have always relied on conventional methods of data collection, taking samples, sending them to the laboratory. Depending on the turnaround time, then you have got data which you can use for decision making, but sometimes that process is very prolonged. Therefore, we have looked at water quality monitoring, which has got what we call real-time data collection, and for that we are using what we call fish telemetry. And there we have developed a manual to monitor water quality and behavior remotely in real time, particularly in the inland aquatic ecosystems. The main aim was actually to increase government, community and stakeholder knowledge uptake, as well as to ensure that the data that is collected is converted into information that can be used for decision making. So in essence, you use what you call fish biotelemetry, where a tag is attached to the dorsal fin of a fish, and that is used as a sensor which generates temperature, oxygen, turbidity, conductivity, as well as flow information or data. And it also provides more information around the fish behavior in its natural habitat, their migration, as well as movement. And with that project, we have found that the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, who are the authority on conservation, have implemented and are taking up this project and seen it as a value to them. So from a health perspective, we have to acknowledge and know that whatever happens, be it from an air quality point of view, from an environmental and land point of view, everything lands in the water. And therefore, water, in our Department of Sanitation in South Africa, we have said that water is life and sanitation is dignity, and therefore it means that water also contributes largely in terms of health. So we wanted and we have created a knowledge hub around contaminants of emerging concerns, and there are two significant areas of research that we are focusing on. One is focused on new and emerging contaminants, and here we're looking at some contaminants such as endocrine disrupting chemicals, antimicrobials, pharmaceuticals, pathogens, chemicals, as well as microplastics. Central to this research is really the management, the understanding, the disposal, the use of all of these emerging contaminants, and how as a country we need to have an implementation plan around how we deal with these challenges. But also we have focused recently on wastewater, use of wastewater surveillance for environmental purposes, where we're able to use it as an indicator to focus monitoring as well as testing, and to be able to allocate more of our resources at hotspots as well as areas where they are mostly needed. But we also should be able to scale this up, or we were able to scale this up during the current pandemic, where we have used the wastewater-based surveillance for epidemiological analysis, where we were able to utilize the indicator information from our wastewater treatment works, and by testing the COVID RNA, and at that level you are able then to come up with information and inform the relevant Department of Health as well as the communicable diseases to say that this is where we're picking up an increase of indicator organisms of this COVID-19, and as a result, in terms of testing, in terms of applying more education and awareness, then you can be able to focus on such areas. We also have utilized the same information to be able to link it together with the National Institute of Communicable Diseases, where they provide the information of testing on an ongoing basis. And we can be proud to tell you that we have in the last at least year and a half been able to be at the forefront of creating awareness, or at least ringing alarm bells around the rise in terms of the different waves as have been identified in South Africa and globally. We also have looked at sanitation in looking at the entire value chain of water. Previously, focus would be on water security separate from sanitation, but we all know that as there is source to tap thinking and movement towards focusing the research that way, is that we have to include sanitation in the research that we are doing. But that has been informed by the current situation in South Africa, where we understand that it is a major challenge, and from 2017 going back to 1996, the country had only then reached about 83% of reach of sanitation. But within that 83%, we know that only households with access to improved sanitation were served with waterborne toilets connected via sewers, or what we call wastewater treatment works. Therefore, there is still a significant portion of the population, particularly 36%, which rely on on-site sanitation alternatives, and 22% of those are improved, while 14% is still unimproved. Therefore, there is a backlog on top of a backlog in terms of what needs to be addressed. So South Africa is embarking on a program that is called the Ministerial Water Services Improvement Plan. And we find that as the Water Research Commission, the work that we are doing has placed us in the right spaces, and we have also looked at opportunities to also consider broader set of interventions. And we know that we are also looking at revising our norms and standards, and WRC has responded to this challenge of sanitation by rolling out a strategic program around sanitation. Therefore, we have what we call the SASTEP program of sanitation, and its vision says, upon conclusion of the SASTEP program, a rejuvenated South African sanitation industry should have emerged that not only creates jobs and contributes to the GDP, but also is a global leader in the application of alternative sanitation technologies that provide everyone in South Africa with access to proper sanitation that minimizes pollution, promotes health, and also safety and water security. Basically, we need to rethink how we have looked at sanitation. Not all sanitation should be through pipes and reticulated system, but we need to ensure that sanitation, like water, has to be fit for purpose. The SASTEP Trust strategy of the Water Research Commission and its partners is aimed at looking at the modernization of off-grid sanitation, and it's looking to offer a new toolbox of sanitation options. It's looking to decentralize and reduce pollution, also should be coupled with the digital economy, but also build sustainable principles, particularly on the issues around nutrient, sludge, and water reuse for easy adoption by the users. We want to build a water-sensitive infrastructure and technologies that are adaptable and easier to replace, but also are able to be expanded or also be moved from one place to another, but also be able to respond to challenges, particularly when we're looking at the recent droughts and floods in specific areas. There are certain off-grid options that have come out of the SASTEP program, and the most important thing around them is that they are modular, and therefore they can be removed from one site and placed on another site because of their design, but also they can be expanded as and when the need arises because of that modular kind of configuration, which is very different from the conventional. One thing that's very also positive around it is that they're manufactured in South Africa, but also they are fully recyclable. There is no need to top up water to flush, hence there is where there is no continuous water supply, the implementation of this off-grid system would not be an issue. Some of the options or examples are the clear recycling toilet, the new generator, Aramlu and Dewdrop, and all of these have got central and important to them water efficiency that is as easy as the EnviroSen or the Easy Split, where we are looking at the separation of the solids and the liquids, and are also focusing on finding subsequent use both for the liquid and the and the solids. But most importantly, when you need it for a household, it would be a different type of a module. From a dense population, it would be a different type of a system that you would do for a household compared to a school or a clinic. And we are hoping that the uptake of this project will be implemented where it is needed most, at local government level. Water sanitation and health requires an integrated approach. We have to be able to think out of the box on a differentiated approach, which must be fit for purpose, determined by the size, the area, as well as the climatic conditions. We have to only make sure that central to everything that we are doing, there is a standardization of quality at every level. That way, making sure whether you are in the rural area or you are in the city, the standards of drinking water, the standards of sanitation are the same. We have to focus on the development of early warning systems, particularly focusing on indicators and surveillance protocols. Communication protocols, particularly cross-sectorally in government, is going to be very important, because when the alarm bells are rung through the early warning systems, everyone needs to start playing their part, but integrated approach must be taken also in terms of how the decisions that are made are impacting on one another. So education and awareness of our people is very much important. They need to understand what are these new systems or technologies, what does it mean for them, and that way we should be able to influence or at least change their view and thinking, and so that they can move away from seeking all of those conventional systems that are not efficient, that are no longer effective, that are costly, taking into consideration our low growth of our economy. In all that we do, we have to be open to community or user feedback for continued improvement. Hence, it is important to carry our communities with us as part of the research that we are doing, as part of knowledge uptake and dissemination, and making sure that when we come up with innovation, they are not left behind, but are able to support the government in the uptake of such innovation. From South Africa, I would like to thank you and say ciao ciao. Enjoy the Brazil Water Week 2022.